Hello, my name is Joseph Rorie, and I'm with the Merriam School of Common Law. Today we're going to be talking about those words that we were bringing up that got falsified into the American language and is now appears to be forever embedded, but maybe what I'm doing here will act as a chloroform to that goal. Put it out. We're either the union that was created by Madison and Jefferson and Adams, or we're the union that got created in 1864. Now, when we put all these words together, they all intended to define a form of government. One way or the other, you would reach a good description of a particular kind of government in either one of these. A proper Congress, what a congressman is and what his job is, versus what he will be doing in the future. We also have words like union, which was a union of states, many states confederated, versus a union that turns into like one body. And even the word united was perverted there in 64. And consider this for the word united. If the term United States absolutely means a one-body formation, and that it means that the united ones are now no longer independent, but are part of a central, single-bodied government, then if that term is correct, then the term United Nations would also have that same meaning and impact, which means that all the countries, including the United States, which is a member of the United Nations, would have submitted to a union out there, and a united, that means a body of one, versus the old form of union. So we could see probably quite a problem there, except for those that are for the United Nations. Well, that would favor you. But the thing about we're looking at is, what is the original America? Is there a way to revive, resuscitate, or whatever, this original government that was taken over by the Union, as they would call themselves, but there basically was some senators that had German influence, the 48ers that had came in and had got into the offices, which was a sin in itself technically, but we just didn't have the constitutional clause to prevent immigrants from actually taking office. Now, in 1814, at the Hartford Convention, that was attempted. One of the attempts in the Hartford Convention was to not allow immigrants to take office. Now, their children could, but not them. We probably would not have had a civil war, because it was immigrants that got in the office and started stirring up things using the German format. Anyway, we use these words like democracy. The problem with democracy is a consistent one. It'll never go away. If you just say, we live on a democracy, well, a democracy is a vote of the people, and the majority wins. And so the losers has to so-called go with the majority. Well, we see a lot of contradictions in like how we actually practice democracy, and then we turn around and say, well, but there are some minorities that needs to sort of become a majority, in our opinion. So if this is the case, then we're not even attempting a democracy anyway, because you're outnumbered if it's a democracy there. So for the minorities out there, you ought to be glad that there's no democracy. You wouldn't even got to be heard. And so what we're looking at is the word like democracy. What does it mean? And actually, can it be practiced legitimately? You know, the answer is probably a slim yes, because there is some things that probably is just irrelevant. And a democracy would not really hurt anybody's feelings or be a problem. When the issue, the same with socialism and democracy, which they all work together, even in the socialist books, you know, they teach that they need a democracy to further their goals. But the let's say a classroom of kids is voting on a field trip to go to the zoo Friday or to the circus Friday. Now that's a pretty irrelevant matter to lose against. And the actual class of 10 or 12 or say 30 can actually raise their hands, and you know, that would be a fair democracy in the sense that you got to go to the zoo instead of the circus. And the loser that just really wanted to go to the circus, you know, he still gets to go to the zoo. And it's really not that important either way, because you don't even have to go to either one of them for that matters. But the point is that a democracy, when it comes down to trying to practice it on subject matters that actually counts, and they change the voting styles, and you know, they got people believing that all your taxes are up because you voted them in, and that was you. You did it to yourself. And we're just good guy governments that's just going to collect like we was told to by you, even though you're griping down, you voted us in somehow. And that's been a trick also. Now, you know, when we're looking at pre-Civil War time, there was a different liberty there. And the word liberty, as we pointed out, these things got diminished, and they're down to barely anybody understanding the difference. And rights has become civil rights instead of rights. And in the pre-Civil War era, all the textbooks and the school books taught that you had natural rights, second, political rights, third, civil rights. And of course they defined them properly as well, that natural rights is God-given rights. You can't argue with that. If you do, go to God and argue with Him. But in the meantime, you know, we're going to exercise our God-given rights, as nobody can take them away. We can relinquish them on our own, or I'm not even sure God would appreciate you doing that. So let's don't even consider the idea of giving up any rights whatsoever. The gifts of God are without repentance, which means your rights are without repentance. God is not going to take them away from you. So we don't need to let mankind find a legal way to take them away from you. So with rights in mind, you got civil rights, which is the loudest drum pounding these days, and the average person have lost what is a civil right. They actually believe that that's your rights, and that's government rights. You have got to put that in your mind. You may want them when it's over. You may want every civil rights out there, but you wouldn't be an American thinking person if that's, in other words, you would be part of the new union, the new unity, the new united, the new Congress, the new federal, the new state. You would be for that. Actually, I do believe that most people that I'm getting this to actually are more socialist than they think they are. I don't think you want to agree to the word socialism because the word itself has been probably properly discouraged for you to be part of it. But the practice is pretty clear. You know, we've got more food stamps or ways for students of any grade of people to falter in any way. They got a way to go to the government and get some kind of a fix. And of course this is done out of the act of socialism, which also comes out of the act of democracy. and you can use democracy when you want to, republic when you want to, socialism when you want to, because that's how this country is pretty much going, a little blend of everything that was never, but it's blending in to mostly socialism, and democracy, of course, is the call word. And if you might want to recall Russia's Communist U.S. Party, their motto is builders of democracy. Well, then give it thought. Put the two together and see if that's what you want. But what we're going to do today is we're going to at least cover some of the repercussions of this and see where we're at. I think you can tell where we're at. We are in a demise, and I don't know if anybody's got a real good answer. I know this is an answer. It may not be the answer, but it's a definitely good answer, is to clean up your vocabulary and learn what's what, and then go against anything that's anti-government. Now, if the government in office right now is the government, then they sure don't know what they're talking about, and they're sure not going by what they took office for. Now, from the way I understand this, the office still exists, and if it doesn't, then we've all got problems. But when the war broke out, they were bent, obviously, on changing words, as we can see what really is going down. Whether slavery had much to do with it, it did. It's anything you can point out wrong. You can always put a hybridized, sensational atmosphere behind it at all times, keep it the #1 issue, when it probably was something that we all know was on its way out on its own, and for that matter, it didn't need a war, we didn't need an amendment to work it out. It would have went out on its own, and besides, the states could have handled that on their own. So, whatever the case is, they're clear that they messed with the words, which means that there must have been a motive somewhere, that if you're going to really do this, we need to change words. We can't just allow these definitions to set. They would always expose this new union. So, in 1860, we've got President Buchanan, and he is concerned in the secession. And so he writes Solomon Black, which is the Attorney General of the day, and asked him, did the United States government have the authority under the Constitution to go and enforce these states to act under their will and to enforce their laws? And Solomon Black basically returned an absolute no. You do not have that power to do that. So Buchanan was told, and I'm sure Lincoln got his little bit of that, but the question is, did anybody ever listen to the, what Buchanan has said? So if we have that problem that they're not even going to listen to the Attorney General, then you have a problem with who's up there then. Because he told them straight out that you don't have any authority to invade the states, and if you do, you'll be absolving the Union yourself, and that Congress will be the guilty party of destroying America. You should read that. That's in Volume 9 of the Attorney General's opinions. If I'm not mistaken, page 560. But it's, those letters are in chronological order, so it doesn't really matter whether I'm right on the page number. You can just read the letters, and when they are dating up to 1860 and into December, you're going to run into it. But the Attorney General told him straight out, without the courts. And what I did notice, he never used the word due process, but when we get into studying the actual meaning and the definition and truth behind due process, you will see what Solomon Black was doing here. But he kept saying that the only way you can handle this problem is to involve the courts. Now that is one of the meanings of due process, the presence of the court, period, end of story. If you're getting fake courts, for instance, you've got the tax courts, you've got the administrative courts, you've got courts that are not the Article 3 judiciary that is the separate branch. Now, like say for instance the tax court, that's created by the legislature, which makes it a legislative court for the body of the Internal Revenue Service. That's not a real court. So if it's not a real court, and we're talking about constitutional terms, then you're not receiving due process no matter how well they set that up and have bailiffs around and these type of clones of what looks like a real trial going on, using the very words verdict, jury, bailiff. A lawyer comes in, sits over to the left, you got jury seats, you got the whole deal. But the question is it the judiciary? And without the judiciary, you're not getting due process. And if you're not getting due process, they cannot take life, liberty, or property from you without it. Now, when Solomon Black was explaining this to them, he made it clear, you got to involve the courts. And the reason why, and Solomon Black was in the position to do this, he just didn't do it. It would have been nice for him to have done it because that would have caused the case. But technically, the so-called evil criminal South that was such rebellion, they want to break us up. Why, whiny baby, whiny baby. Well, what they did was decide to just get Congress and the executive branch together, supposedly enact a few laws, that magic word, let it be enacted, or it is enacted. All of a sudden, whoop, things changes. That's the way it is, everybody. Well, anyway, they get this together. They go beat up the South. All right. Here's the problem. And the reason why that we will be teaching in the future about, we know that the words change, we got that. Here is the problem with the invasion of the northern states. Now, due process is required before you can take life, liberty, and property. And if you're accused of something, you've got to take life, liberty, and property. You have to give due process in order to get that life, liberty, and property. Well, the states never received a trial, nor did they even get a summons, nor did anybody file an indictment and say, South Carolina's a criminal crook, and here's my complaint. I want this heard in a court. And the court looks at it as a legitimate complaint, sends out the summons, and let's say South Carolina refuses to show up because they claim we're out of the union. Well, at the most that they could have done back then was enforce their summons. If they believed that there was a reason that South Carolina is going to have to be pushed back in through the judiciary to enforce it, then they would have to receive the summons, and then when they rejected the summons, then the judiciary can appoint the necessary marshals to go and get these people brought to them, because there is a constitutional mandated hearing, and that the papers are filed properly, and you're accused of being a criminal by seceding. And of course, not one secession paper ever talked rebellion. Nobody talked rebellion except the North. That's what they labeled the South from the beginning. The rebellious, the rebels, So, getting tagged with that name is probably a good strategy for them. They pulled it off pretty good. But if you look at the fact that that Black had already told them that they'd have to use the court. Well, they didn't. We know that. Now that puts us into a legal problem today. The reason why is the North and the South, whether who was right or who was wrong, it has never been adjudicated. No court case ever appeared. No state got tried or attempted to be tried. And so the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, plainly had protections for the states, not the people. Fifth Amendment does not apply to the free man or the state citizens. That is a contract between the federal government and the states. So what we're going to do here is look this over. The due process that was denied, yet all these things were taken away from the South. They even removed the legislatures and put theirs in. They robbed and plundered, and I mean, just got by with total thievery. And continue that after the war. They never ended until it just, when everybody finally softened up. And I'm going to tell you, it took a while. And you talk about a downtrodden and defeated South, still very radical there for a while there with what little they had left in them. But now, you know, you're deceived, so it's an easier, you know, antidote to your suspicions, is that we'll just fix you up with a new definition and you'll be all right. And take 2 in the morning and see me when you need a new word. Well, this is where we're at. The Black's Law Dictionaries has done the same. They manipulated like mistrial, a citation, public, and let's see, there's a handful. I can't think of them right off. We'll get to them in a future deal. I'm trying to keep this short, so I won't close it out now, just to keep it short so that I get probably some more listeners. With the word problem and Noah Porter's exchange, of course, got to mention to you, he also got elected dean of the Yale University just 2 years after that, so coincident or not. But, you know, we want you to know the truth. If anybody has anything to add, send in. Would turn this in, I'll be glad to put it out there with you. You can email me by dueprocessexplained@gmail.com. And if, of course, we'd rather do road trips. That's what I was saying earlier on in this. And then I'm not necessarily wanting to do this camera job here and look at a camera and sort of imagine you out there. I would prefer seeing you out there, and that's why we like the road trips. And me and Barron would be at all of them. We would just, you know, we'd have fun talking one-on-one, and people there to raise their hands. But what we're going to do now is go ahead and close the day out, give you something to ask. Maybe I wasn't as clarified as I should be on something, and you want something more specific. Thank you, and we'll see you later.